We have time. Do we want to do it?
There's better things to do with I'm curious. Think about it. Maybe we could throw a thing back and forth. See people.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Is it cold there, Kevin? You look so dressed. You look dressed for different weather than I'm used to seeing.
I'm in LA and it's just chilly outside, and I'm outside for the first time, which is nice. So. It's also bright, so I wanted to wear a hat. I didn't want to wear sunglasses because it just seems too impersonal.
But I'm inside, so I felt like I should take it off. It's like been a rocky transition to ball cap from toque. Still working on it. So I know Matt P is also joining us, so let's maybe wait a second. And yes, I see him on Slack.
Dawn, you kind of look like you're working in a space station or something.
I am.
Like, what's that movie? I don't know.
I'm actually I'm beside back on. Oh no, interference. I'm at Hack Lab.
I'm trying to position my camera so the poster behind me looks like it's an actual landscape. There.
It looks really good.
I'm at the beach in a relatively recognizable IKEA photo.
I need to do something with the brakes.
What was that? Okay.
How's everyone else doing? Maybe we give it like another minute. Anyone have idle thoughts? Cool images to drop?
Liz, you want some? I know you always have a beer for me.
Oh yeah, heads up, I have to leave at 6. I have to catch a flight. I might, depending on traffic, what the traffic looks like on the magical internet map, I might have a few extra minutes. But roughly 6. I'm going to have to angle towards leaving.
Okay, well, maybe we would aim to make the most of all of our shared time then. I'm wondering if someone is able to take notes for today, and I dropped the link in the chat. Okay. Sorry, I feel like there's still some interference stuff going on. I'm getting a little confused. Sorry, back on. Okay, so Matt's going to take notes, and I put a little bit of an agenda, or I put an agenda that maybe we could just look at now and make sure it makes sense for time, and we could do some slight adjustments. I think I put the 2 priority things at the front, giving us the most time. And we have an intro and recap, but I believe everyone knows each other, so we don't have to go through the intros. So maybe for the recap, I'll just say that I pulled together both the outcomes from our last March meeting, as well as like kind of the to-dos that came out of the round tables. So I'm not gonna go through those in depth, but we did also have a roundtable sort of check-in on where things are at. And I think we've represented either in like a longer discussion or in the discussion topic section, the critical like needs, imagining as we always that we might not get to everything. The parts that I thought we needed to cover today, and I want to maybe just confirm this works with you all, is a longer, so going through partner updates again, a longer amount of time looking at the mission vision draft work that Matt, Zed, Brendan, and Ray have been steering. Kind of checking back in on the decision-making process. I have a stray S there. And then in the discussion topics, I thought the 2 critical ones were the partners meeting and then maybe Decentralized Web Summit as like a, Matt, Zed, if you have anything you want to share about that. And then we have the remaining, so reading course, website, outreach partners, thinking about the requirements work plan doc. That's on me. I didn't follow up with Michelle actually about that. And then code of conduct, and even give an update. Is there something not on here that people think is really critical? And I would say if it's really critical, it probably needs to be above the partners meeting fold. That feel okay? Awesome. Okay, so then why don't we not spend time reviewing the recap unless people kind of want to dive back into there, and let's go directly to partner updates. And so we imagine this being like a 3-ish minute per partner update, so a brief, unless there's like so much exciting, important things to talk about. And I think did a slight rejig of order. So I'm wondering if Protocol Labs, if Matt, Zed, you'd be cool to lead us right when you take a bite of a thing. I can ask someone else. Next, maybe Query.
Sure. So I'll give our update for today. The dev team here, Brendan, Tom, and Casey, are very close to having Query as a base working as a proof of concept. And so their focus, as soon as that goes live, is to begin populating with all kinds of data, beginning with stuff from the Edgy Doors Duke grant stuff, web monitoring, data rescue, and much, much more. Related to that, of course, is them having an Electron app that people will actually be able to interact with the data sets and not need to do anything on the command line, which is another major milestone. We're also, if you go to app.query.io, you're going to see a read-only message for an ability to view and discover data sets through the traditional web. And we'll make you download Query in order to play with them and copy the data sets or work off of them. This will be a way for data sets to be discoverable on the traditional web. So where that leads is a kind of federated model between distributed system where these data sets are actually stored and played with and tracked, but discoverable on the web 1.0, whatever 0.0 it is. Yeah, so I guess we just hope that you guys can stand by, and when Brendan feels like we're ready to let you guys download and play with this, we'll let you guys break it and show us the bugs and stuff like that. That's a lot of stuff real quickly, I guess, but I think that's all we need to share.
Yeah, thank you. That's wonderful. Maybe if there's one or two immediate questions.
You did it perfect.
Amazing. Can I hand it off now, Matt Zed, for a protocol update?
Yeah, I love the direction that query is taking this stuff. The whole indexing, discoverability in the centralized context is a good move. So what have Protocol Labs been up to? Well, Michelle Bruce has interviewed Brendan and Don, and those interviews are great. I don't know if you guys are willing to let other Data Together people listen to them, but they were like, it was really wonderful to get to listen to it and hear your perspective and on like the history of all of this and what's needed and what's next. It's great. So she'll be doing another round of interviews that are aimed at having a targeted sort of reflection of here are the design requirements of what Edgy needs out of the Data Together software. And so that's very promising. And what we'll do is another round of interviews. Then I'll work with her to produce the requirements document, and then we'll do a call where she presents the preliminary, here's what we think Edgy needs, right? And the point there would be to source more feedback. It would also be it would be cool to have a broader set of Edgy people on there. So maybe people like Michelle Murphy would be really cool to include on it, but I don't know that you would want to use that as the like, hey, all of Edgy, here's what's going on. You might want to do that later with a more refined version of the document. So working on that, I am on the verge of getting to hire a really amazing product owner for large volumes of data on IPFS. And if we hire the person I'm looking at, they are extremely talented at sort of product design and community building and dealing with agencies. So that, if it moves forward, will be very exciting. Also today, I announced that we will be having an IPFS summit in Berlin in the second week of July. That's going to be a focused working meeting for people who are directly using IPFS. So I mean, Data Together, like one or two reps from Data Together would certainly be welcome, but also not absolutely necessary because it's more of like the working groups doing very focused planning. But that summit is a precursor to an IPFS conference, which will be much bigger in November in Lisbon. And that's where we'll definitely want to be featuring Data Together people as presenters. And I'm guessing that Brendan will be at the summit either way. So you sort of, if you get Brendan there, you kind of have the Data Together voice represented. But it would also be cool to have an additional Data Together perspective there if you want to come. I think that's the majority of the Protocol Labs update.
Any questions? Back on.
Yeah, there was mention of the interviews, and are those were you saying if when they get released, or was there a point to where they were, or?
It's up to the interviewees. We didn't ask for permission because by default, when we do interviews like that, they're only for internal use. But now that I've listened to them, it was like, oh wow, the other Data Together people would totally, if you had time to listen to them, you would enjoy listening to them and get a lot out of it. So you guys might want to, if you guys are okay with it, we could share them.
Yeah, it seems like an oral history. It would be cool to get back.
Yeah.
I have two questions. When are they're both date ones? Do you have a sense of the timeline for the sort of the next phase with Michelle? And it's totally fine if not, but it would be good just to like hold that in our minds. And then also for the summit, do you have dates for that?
Yeah, so the IPFS summit, we're aiming at the 10th to the 13th of July. We haven't fully nailed that down, but that's our target dates in Berlin. With the thing with Michelle, I think it was partially dependent upon when the school year at University of Toronto ends. So she was going to follow up with you guys to see what works with your schedules. And so that was, but it's roughly, we were thinking like early to mid-June would be that preliminary presentation. So between now and then, she would do the interviews and the refining of her findings, and then this preliminary presentation of her findings would be in somewhere around mid-June. But she'll follow up by email, and I know that Matt Price and Dawn being busy at University of Toronto was one of the factors she's thinking of.
Wonderful, thanks. Any last questions? And if not, we can move on to Edgy. And I was going to ask Kevin if you would be maybe as a steering committee person, maybe interested in, I think so the last meeting was in April. I think there's been a lot on some of the grant side. If you feel comfortable speaking to like maybe broader Edgy things really briefly, and then I can provide some context around archiving. But Matt Price might be better suited towards that, given his new role. This is me just responsibilizing all of you.
I wish I had some prior preparation. Quickly, I guess. So the biggest news is we got the Packer grant for $500,000 over 2 years. So the thing that we're moving towards now is just hiring, a lot of hiring right now. So there's looking for an admin hire to just handle basic paperwork across all of Edgy. And then web monitoring is looking for a senior software dev and a project manager. And then on the archiving side, I think there's only, in the Packer grant, there's only money for a part-time archiving project manager, and we're waiting for Doris. So we applied for the Doris Duke grant, and we'll hear back about that in June. So we'll see. Hopefully, we get more money for like archiving staff over there. What am I missing? What do people want to hear about?
Web monitoring?
Web monitoring side, we are moving closer to getting information from the Internet Archive and moving off of Versionista. So we've hit some technical snags like getting all this influx of data from the Internet Archive, which is a lot more than what we were getting before. So a new report just came out. I forget what the topic of the report was, but we also put up a comment for the climate, climate power, I forget, some repeal is happening, so then they were asking for comments, and then a bunch of people worked on a comment on that repeal. Yeah. Clean Power Pan, there you go, just got it.
Thank you, I feel like that was perfect. Thank you for also rolling with me, just putting you on the spot. Matt Price, do you, or maybe Jess or Brendan, I know I've been less involved at steering committee meetings.
It would be absurd for me to do it. I barely showed up. So someone else should do it.
Jess, you want to take a stab?
Well, we're just like passing the buck here.
I'll take the buck back. You can pass it back. It's fine.
No, I'm just like trying to rack my brain with what we've been doing apart from, we put a lot of work into the Doris Duke grant. It was a big push from a lot of folks in archiving, which was really great to get it out the door. And beyond that, I think, just participating in Data Together roundtables. What else am I missing? And some road mapping, I guess, for the working group in archiving to think about how the brainstorming that went into the Doris Duke grant might actually roll into a plan into what the working group is going to be and what it wants to be in the future. So that's been pretty fun, kind of in conjunction with Data Together as well as in a kind of wider Edgy sense. That would be all I have comes to mind.
Pakon and then Matt P.
I don't think I have the answer on this, but a question is for the steering committee. Is there a role change coming up soon, and that's in the conversation?
Role change for who?
I don't know. I thought the roles kind of rotate, and there's like a talk of rotation.
Yeah.
I mean, you go ahead, Kevin.
I was just say, yeah, because there was talk about rotating because we wanted just like diversity moving through the steering committee, but then we realized that certain roles, like the grants coordinator who's dealing with like the funders and stuff, they should be more consistent. You don't want like our funders to have to deal with a different person every 4 months. So that's the discussion that's happening right now. And then also it's just, there are people, the normal people just rotating off, and we're trying to figure out a good way to make that flow, because there's a lot of work doing all this stuff on in the volunteer time. Everybody understands that, so we're just trying to like not monopolize anybody's time and give them the rest that they need.
I think as relates to archiving, I have agreed to be a little more responsible when I get back in May from India. So mid-May, I'll come back and start to represent the archiving group at the steering committee, which hasn't really had, full representation there yet, sort of ever. And I think the other thing that got left off of Jess's list is all the stuff that people from Query have been doing on the archiving side, kind of not developing an archiving platform or something like that, but doing actual, archiving work. And in particular, I'm thinking about the environmental impact statements the interface that they put together. I don't know, Brandon, if that was the main thing you were kind of thinking was left out of Jess's, or is there other stuff too?
I can't remember. Did we report on that prior?
I don't think it was done a month ago. So
yeah, I'm really, to be honest, my brain's so stuck in the thinking about the next steps for that, which is in my mind is integrating with the Environmental Data Justice Working Group and seeing what we can sort of draw out of okay, when we move an archive, can we then enhance that archive because it now benefits from community input? And that to me is sort of where I'm really excited to head. But there's going to be a whole bunch of groundwork there before we can get there. So it's like more an excitement than an announcement.
Awesome. It's always surprising when we say it all together how much work we all do. Terrifying. Cool. So maybe now we can turn. Oh yeah, go Liz. Before we turn to mission, vision, draft.
I was thinking Public Lab was a partner here, so I was going to update on
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, that was me not doing a good job of pasting from previous. Please, thank you.
Oh, it's okay. I can keep it short and just say that we're supporting a number of community data collection projects around indoor air quality with apps and soil sampling in terms of lab results and ways of holding that data as private groups, ways of holding that data as private groups that share out some simplified less version publicly. Or, in what cases do people need to, is it okay to move straight to a public archive, which most of aerial mapping data is handled in Public Lab. Yeah, so anything about how communities hold data, we are ready for that talk. And yeah, we're also talking with Internet Archive.
That's so exciting. I'm really sorry. I feel like I just pasted the old agenda and I forgot of our intervening conversations about partner updates. So now to turn to the mission and vision, and I'm wondering if how you all, I know Ray is joining us a little bit late. Is it okay if we start now, Brendan and Matt said? I sort of budgeted 20 minutes, but it can be a little longer because we're a little ahead of schedule. And I think so the frame we had said is we had a round table on this and then wanted to bring a draft here to have a conversation with some, text that had taken into account what had been written before, with the goal of sort of ratifying whatever our process is for that at the partners meeting. Mm-hmm. So I'll hand it off to you all.
All right, I think I can lead this. First of all, having read through all the stuff we've generated, thanks to everyone who has read all of that and then contributed more. It's like a vast corpus of like great ideas. And like I reread all of it again today, and I had this kind of, I just agree with all of it. Right? Like there's like, can't we just say yes, all of it? And figuring out how to condense this all into something more concise is like a big is hard. So we do have something that's, if everyone can follow that link, actually, if I share my screen, that might even focus the discussion a little bit more. I'm on this document, but it's linked in the notes. Don put it in the notes. And so this is a provisional document that's, I sort of on the fly today decided, let's strip this back and make this document as minimal as possible and as stripped back as possible, because I think part of the problem is that we keep creating new documents that take a fresh stab at expressing the mission, and then they sprawl and like they start accumulating notes and comments. So let's use this one as a way to refine and keep focusing and stripping back, adding a bit, stripping back, adding a bit, stripping back, those kinds of things. And so in terms of, so what we landed on is something that's a stab at a mission we can discuss. On mission, things are sort of still all over the place, but maybe we can provide some more focus. An interesting thing though is in terms of values, from the discussions that we had, there's actually some very pretty clear values emerging. So I want to look at the mission, then jump to values, and then we can come back to mission. Come back to vision. So do mission, then values, and then try to come back to the hard one of vision. So mission, we sort of merged. There was data together helps communities steward the data they care about. There was another formulation that emphasizes decentralized technologies and making a better web. And so we ended up settling on a sort of merged version of those two that emphasizes helping communities. It uses the language of stewardship and the data you care about, but it also includes this notion of decentralized technologies. So that was our stab at simple and straightforward of help communities use decentralized technologies to steward the data they care about. It's not the punchiest mission I've ever read, but it's a solid stab. So do we want to pause and discuss the mission, or do we want to look at the values and the vision also?
I want to pause.
Okay. So the other thing to look at, if we're going to pause and look at mission, is in this document, which now has even more information. I dumped a bunch more notes. So there's this amazing like reference document of all these other source documents. And then there's these are the 4 formulations of the mission that I think have been expressed in these different documents and commented on. So yeah, Matt, did you have observations you wanted to jump in with?
I want to hear from other people. I like it a lot, and I agree that it could be punchier, and I feel like the kind of what is missing is like the sense of what's urgent and exciting about it, right? Not every mission statement accomplishes that in a way. Sometimes there's just good stuff that needs to be done, and you're not able to have it be exciting. But I wonder if there's an exciting word somewhere, or a sense of ethical responsibility or something like that. Like in number 4, forms the civic layer of the decentralized web, has that sense of like what does data together, what does it call forth beyond just the data itself?
I like that. Are you posing that as a question, or?
I guess so. I guess if there were, well, I'd like to hear if other people agree that the as phrased right now, that it captures a lot of what we want. So if that's not a consensus position, then I think we need to have a broader conversation. But if it is sort of consensus that is close, then I would love to have to think about what 2 or 3 more words or slightly different phrase is necessary to capture the sense of a kind of ethical imperative or an exciting opportunity.
John, do you want to manage the stack for this discussion, or
Sorry.
or do you want me
Oh,
to?
sure. I can manage it. So I've just jumped on and I see PatCon raising his hand. I'm having a hard time seeing everyone, so if you all could drop your thing in the chat, that'd be wonderful. My brief first response is, I think we had kind of understood that we might come up with a mission that we intend to revise once more partners come on board.
Mm-hmm.
So, Matt, I think you flag a lot of really good things, but I feel like it's okay if we don't nail like the most concise using that forward-seeking language immediately. Yeah.
And that was Jess next, or PatCon?
I saw PatCon and then Brendan.
I just was proposing, I think if what Don says feels right, then it can be negated, but proposing just like a temperature check on like, did what Matt say connected with people, whether they had a solution or a particular response. Like, I find it hard when docs are sharing, we can't actually all see each other. So yeah.
Do you want me to stop sharing?
I don't know, it might just be yeah.
It's a tricky, we can all see the document. You see where I was focusing. So
yeah,
that's the main thing. So we are all looking at the same text.
But yeah, I don't know, like, is it worth just doing a thumbs up, thumbs down? Not that we have to like resolve it now, but like, are you feeling for what Matt was saying, like up, down, or middle?
Well, which Matt?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Matt P. I don't know. Does it feel like there's something like missing from it, from this?
Sorry, can we just get a little clarification on what the question is? Is there
my question anyway is, does this seem like the right direction and are we close? And if not, then we need to have a broader conversation. Is that okay, Pat? Trick?
Yeah. I think I just was trying to get us. It's hard to read people's faces, and I guess I was just looking for a temperature check on with what you were saying, connecting with people. It kind of connected with me at the last second, and it like changed, but I didn't know if. Yeah, I think it was looking for that temperature check on like, do you agree with Matt, or does not seem like an issue?
So are we okay running a temperature check now, or Liz, do you have an immediate response before we do that?
I want to hear the whole package, the vision and values together, because I think a lot of inspiring stuff is there. And then I'll be able to temperature about, yes, I just verbed temperature. I'll be able to temperature about if the mission is good to stand on its own, if that's fair.
So that sounds great. So why don't we aim to have that temperature check with the framing that Matt P did, but Brendan, you are on stack, and then I'll hand it back off to Matt Zed.
Yeah, I think we should totally defer and like, let's hear out the whole thing and then go from there. Yeah, and so Matt, if you want to take over, Matt Z, if you want to take over screen share again, I think that would make sense.
Sure. And I'll just throw in my response to Matt P's was like, we might be able to read. It might just be a wordsmithing thing to get a slightly stronger, punchier thing. All right, so I'll share again. Oh, now suddenly I've forgotten how to screen share. I did it moments ago. There's my screen. And so we are on this document. All right, so I'm going to jump past vision for a moment because that one proved difficult. Values, things that emerged out of all of these conversations. There were some very, very clear patterns and even language that emerged repeatedly that I think we might even be able to tease this apart into some of it is values and some of it is a model. So then even listless would sort of shrink and become even more focused. And then there are some values flagged in the other documents we may want to add back into here. But the quick thing would be, there's a big educational component. This actually arose in those interviews of edgy people talking about, there's been a lot of education of turning and educating other edgy people about like what the thinking is here and how peer-to-peer technologies align with these principles. So acknowledging that educational component is important. Working with trust, not trustlessness. I think this is something that comes up in my discussions a lot of, this is like it's decentralized, but not a blockchain. We're emphasizing the idea of we're operating in an environment where when you say decentralized now, people think they assume you're talking about blockchains, which are specifically designed to operate in a trustless environment and use ultimately capitalist incentives to get people to like maintain the commons. And what we're exploring is explicitly the alternative to that. It's about leveraging, this is where we get to the next point, leveraging the power of community and existing connections and trust and shared interest to achieve a governing of the commons. And then there's some bullet points there that I won't dive into now, but basically just like really good exploration around aspects of this, of what it means to be aligning incentives based on existing incentives, not just paying people to store stuff. And that leads to this notion of participatory stewardship, which we end up using a lot. And there's a bunch of little details in there of like, what does that look like? So being able to decide both what to store and what not to store, sharing the possession of things, participating in the activities of describing and interlinking data. So having the agency to decide how things are connected and just how they're described. Referencing sort of Elinor Ostrom's 8 principles of managing the commons and explicitly acknowledging that this is activities of managing a commons, but it also goes further. And then this was a stab at some language for it. So that participatory stewardship is imagining a world where everyone participates in many different communities and networks, and those communities coordinate to decide what information they will store and disseminate. So that was just a stab that came out while I was going through all this. Then there's this theme of just identifying patterns and telling the story of how those patterns apply in the world. So identifying the patterns of, for example, if you're a researcher who's doing analysis on a data set, you probably already have downloaded a copy of the data set, and all of your peers have also downloaded copies of the data set. So you have already actually decentralized the data. You're just using a centralized protocol to communicate. So if you flip that script and say it's already decentralized and you just use a better protocol to coordinate, you suddenly have a network of stewardship that was already there. And so starting to like call out those patterns. And also this sense of pointing to things like, this is a commons, and this is the problems here are the problems of managing a commons. So that sense of patterns. Then this one's important. So this sort of gets at the, what do you mean by community? And community is a loaded topic, and it's a big term, and it means lots of different things to many different people. So this like, people have many identities, they're connected to many networks, they participate in many communities, they could potentially be served by a variety of institutions and community groups, etc. And so this sense of acknowledging that that's part of what's at play here, that we all participate in many different ways and many different angles in these networks. Then there's the topic around including the voices of non-technical users, people with less financial resources, and other marginalized groups in the stewardship of the data that impacts them. And so that's getting into the things of like mere possession of the data doesn't address community's needs. You also need tools and skills and knowledge and a capacity to act on that data. So that's the running list. There are a couple things that are specifically speaking to institutions that I don't think we need to dive into. But I feel like this gets a pretty strong condensation of a lot of the themes that we all have like really strong alignment on, and we've done a lot of really rich thinking around. So I'm going to pause for a moment to discuss those before we talk about the vision that's just doing a ham-fisted job of trying to condense all of that. What are people's thoughts on that? Does that list feel representative of what we've got going on?
That's great.
All right. And so yeah, so if we have that, one, that's great information to have. We can refine the text that we have there, and suddenly we have this great expression of values. And again, we might be able to tease it into saying participatory stewardship is actually a model, and sort of separate that out. So you have values and then you have the model. Public lab, agree with your point that some of this might be model. Okay. And so, well then, okay, well with that check, let's look at the vision, and I think you'll immediately feel how it's not getting it. It's trying really hard to encapsulate all of this. So this is my stab that I just wrote today. We had a couple different versions, but making it possible to leverage the power of community, trust, and shared interest to create a civic layer of the web that runs on participatory stewardship, where people use decentralized technology to cooperatively store, describe, verify, preserve, and distribute the data they care about. So this is like a total mashup of like 5 different versions.
I was going to say, it's very a thorough sentence.
Yeah, so if you look in this other document, the one that's got tons and tons of notes, and you read through all of these, you'll see a little bit of little bit of this one, a little bit of that one. So it's kind of just shoving them all together in a not very graceful way. So I figured it was better to discuss and see where to go with that. I'll actually call out, is there anything here to specifically call out? No, nothing that I need to be the only one discussing it. It's more us all looking at all these and discussing. So since I can see everyone, so Brendan, and I'll keep the stack.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, so just quickly before I get into it, 10 more minutes. Is that okay, everybody? Done? Good. Okay, cool. I just wanted to point out that, like, I think all this needs is more time. Well, not all this needs, but one thing that this would benefit from is more time, because we did a lot of, in the meeting that Matt and I had, we sort of put a lot of this together, and you sort of look at it on its face, and we had another rich discussion that wandered off into a number of weeds. But I think this, for me, the really big theme that emerged was this conversation of starting from trust and starting from a position of trust and understanding how we can sort of graph that downward. So that to me was a really exciting, like, first thing that emerged, but something that immediately resonated with me was that we should take, if that's the first thing that shook out, then we should keep going, because finally getting some of these ideas onto the same pages are really starting to build sort of building blocks that are starting to fit together better than they have in the past. And that to me feels like, and when Don said that, like, this is sort of a starting point, like, let's just sort of get the starting blocks where we need to. And I'm far more okay with this, with the belief that this is very much a work in progress, and that we would sort of refine this like crazy. But I'm deeply excited about the fact that just literally taking meeting notes that we've been making copious things of, and like typing up things people have been saying in videos. And like, I spent a bunch of time just like typing up Matt Zumwalt's talks and everything that we had recorded of Liz, and just literally smashed them both onto the page and went, okay, cool. And you can literally just take in there, just highlighter to some of these things. And it's just really exciting stuff. Like, our meetings are turning into work, and they're starting to deliver work product. And for me, that was like a huge, really awesome moment. And I just want to keep doing more of it. Okay, sorry, end rant.
Dawn, do you want to unpack what you said here in the chat?
Sure. Yeah, I really feel like the first version in the vision is something where on first read, you can read through it, and I feel like have a sense. I think there could be more refining, as with all of these things over time. Just looking at the newest version that you presented, it might be like one too many things, so I feel like I'm like juggling, trying to like hold all of them in my mind when I read through that sentence. That was all I meant. But I feel like they're all hovering around something, like it feels like they're on that path.
Matt Price?
Am I next? I agree that the first version to me doesn't read as, I mean, the version 0, the one that's at the top, is very hard to scan. Whereas the other kind of version 1, 2, 3, 4 are much more like, they clearly have a direction and they tell you what they're doing. I like version 1 a lot, also, like several other people are saying. It may be a little ambitious, together we are the civic layer of the decentralized web. I mean, we, all of us are, but we, the people in this room, are not. So I like it a lot, and I would, not want to pretend that we're something that we're not.
Yeah, I'll jump in with that one. It's almost so that I specifically don't want to have like one group of people claim to be the solution. And so there's a changing of the language there that I would want. And then there's the sense of this is a civic layer for the web, not just the decentralized web, but it would be using decentralized technologies. So that's like the other thing that when I read that version, I want to like inject those two changes, but I focused on iterating on other options rather than like pushing on refining that one. But if we were to push on that specific one, those are the changes I'd jump at. Did anyone else chime in? And if you've got your camera turned off, you can just type your name in the chat. Ray. Hey, Ray. You're here. Oh, you're muted.
I was looking for a little bit, but I'll chime in now. So one thing we talked about earlier was, and I want to bring it again because I think it's important, is just expanding on, and if we're gravitating toward version 1, is just where it says where communities, and the word communities, because I think at least for me, it brings me to a very specific thing in mind where I think when we were discussing, we often said like, and it's a mouthful, but like individuals, communities, and institutions. And so if I just wanted to bring up the idea of expanding communities a little bit, because although in a way communities can mean a lot of different things, I think it generally brings into mind like more a very specific thing, like more sort of activists or sort of, group community kind of activism kinds of things that I wanted to broaden that, because a community could be one person or two people. It could just be like five researchers working on a project together that need to share data or something like that. And I wanted to make sure we make sure that it's expansive enough to fit all our use cases.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that maybe we've been talking about communities in Data Together, since we started talking about it, and it sort of became clear that we meant often communities of researchers or whatever. But I'm not sure that it reads that way to other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I actually, in our talk, I think I realized that was one of the fundamental disconnects, because when I use the word community, I use it very much as like this kind of like, as like a placeholder for just like group. and we realized in talking that like we had different communities in mind the whole time. And so, yeah, I think it was that Ray's really got a point here.
Yeah, along with Brendan or Ray's point, it's also just linguistically, if the communities are working cooperatively, is that like community A is cooperating with community B, or is it that the community is the means of cooperation amongst its members? And there's like that actually, depending on how you read that, it like the whole sentence feels different. So well then, I mean, we're not going to finish all of this on this one call. So if we think about next steps, seems like let's take that temperature check on the mission. And it seems like on the vision, it's obvious we have to do a little bit more wordsmithing, come back with a new version and discuss. Maybe if we focus on refining that version 1 and build from there, we might get towards something. And I can also work on getting those values expressed in a clearer way. Matt Price had your hands up.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, then just what was the expression of Matt's temperature check? When people look at this mission, does it feel, and I just suggested a new wording. So it just said help instead of drive towards creating a civic layer to the web. So help communities use decentralized technologies to steward the data they care about. Does that feel like we're getting in the right direction? does anyone have misgivings about like this is like not aligned? Matt?
I just had a Drive Turd wasn't working for me, but I was wondering if help to create a civic layer for the web, to the web.
All right.
Because and what I thought worked about that was that we don't imagine ourselves to be creating it on our own or to be able to constitute the civic layer of the web, but we can help people who also care about it to do to accomplish what they want to accomplish.
Don?
Can we frame the question in a way where the thumbs up is that people feel okay about it? I think it was framed as a negative,
Sorry.
so I'm a little sure
Double negatives are
how
terrible
to
with
respond to a check-in.
Yeah. So the check-in is thumbs up if you feel like this is moving in the right direction and it's moving towards being an expression of the mission that we want to be the mission of this organization. And thumbs down if you have misgivings. Okay, so we have one in between. So Liz, could you unpack what's rubbing you wrong?
Yeah, actually, I really do think that this is aligned and like says like basically what we're trying to get at. But I think it's I think this sentence could be also pretty different. There are so many words, like based on what came out of the broader vision brainstorm that you just went through. I mean, we have a lot of words like educate and convene, and like we have a lot more interesting verbs, I think, that could add color. So basically, I really am thumbs up about the whole direction, but I think the sentence is not great. But I feel good about it.
I think you're muted, Matt said.
Ha! All right. So totally. I'll let Brendan talk and then I'll say what I was just saying with my microphone off.
You sure? Go for it.
I was just saying I've been in working on this, feeling this tension between keeping the mission more minimal and pushing more language into the vision versus packing more of this language into the mission. And I've sort of gone back and forth. But that also might feel clearer starting from this document, which simplifies and tidies up a whole lot.
Yeah, actually, and that's perfect because I can dovetail on that. I think we've come up with a couple of things here that are represent really big progress to me. I think we have a lot of consensus here. This feels like a linguistic question, not necessarily a conceptual question, which is really exciting. I think we've come up with a really nice format of using one notes document where we can accumulate a lot of information and then sort of distilling into a second document, which is creating a sort of nicer working model for these check-ins. And so and that to me seems to be yielding some really nice results here. And so personally, I'm very excited at I'm sort of like a rough consensus and working code type where it's like, okay, cool, it's close enough. I know that we will refine this later. And I'm sort of under the impression that we will overhaul this later. But I like the idea of momentum sometimes. And so I'm more than happy to thumbs up things as I know that we can, when we get time, we can sort of improve them. But that's sort of where I'm coming from when I like thumbs up. I think the general movement direction is good.
So we've maybe, unless there's final comments, we've maybe done what we could cover on this call regarding this document. Okay, so final comments, Don, Matt.
Mine is actually less a final comment and more of a transitioning from here into decision making and the planning meeting. So I will maybe let Matt make a final. Okay. So my question, maybe back to you all as a group, is the way we had imagined this was we would have sort of do exactly what you did now, and aim to sort of like have a version that we would maybe workshop or do some work together on when we're all in the same place, because that's always fun. And that would be kind of like ratified at that meeting. I'm wondering, we were also linking it to how we would understand or articulate our decision-making process. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little to what you see between now and that meeting needing to happen on the language side, and then we could transition into talking about questions around decision making to set us up so we do enough work before we're in person so that it's like really productive.
I have not given much thought to process of what happens between now and midsummer. Does anyone have suggestions of how what we do next? I mean, certainly people can comment on the document, and maybe if we set a deadline for getting people to put at least their first round of comments into their comments and suggested edits and things in there, we could say 1 week, get in that first round of suggested edits, and that lets us by it's the 30th of May, so, or 30th of April. So then the following week we could dive in, like Ray and Brendan and I could reconvene to like do some more wordsmithing. And that's not a closed group. If you like, raise your hand if you want to jump in and be part of this next round of wordsmithing. Okay, nobody's raising their hand that has their camera on. Oh, Dawn?
I mean, I would love to if possible. I think maybe what would have to happen is that call could be published in advance, like just like do a poll or something so that more people could attend. But that timing might just be difficult for me.
So post it on a calendar so people can opt in if they happen to be free. And we'll aim to do that like later part of next week. And then that will then produce a more refined version of this. And it sounds like Matt Price was saying he would want to jump in that like following round of effort once we've got a more refined version. Okay. Ray and Brendan, can you help me make sure to get that scheduled next week and spread around the information? Okay. All right, so yeah, that's the next step. That would lead to a follow-on where we're going to have something relatively refined that gives it, and maybe recommendations for how to land it at the in-person meeting in this midsummer.
I have a quick question for the working group. Did you do any, in your copious notes, did you do any collecting of mission statements from other organizations that you kind of liked, either the pithiness of or the directness of, something we could kind of also put our brains on?
We did not. We focused on mining all of the discussions within this group and to try to extract, there's a lot there. And so we didn't, yeah, our effort went into extracting from that rather than looking for inspiration elsewhere.
Yeah, and it really came through. It's so nice.
Are you suggesting we should, for this next round, maybe dig up good reference points? Might help us land it.
I mean, not a suggestion per se. It's something that people do sometimes when they get this close.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Good idea.
Is there someone who could specifically take that on, either this round or it could also be the next round, maybe, right? Liz, does that sound right?
I think it's totally optional. Sometimes I think it's one of those moves that sometimes, like, to move your writing to the next level, sometimes you want to read the greats. That's all. It could be pretty ad hoc, I think.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to add a note in here, a comment, so that when I return to this in a few days, I'll be like, oh yeah, I should read it. Well, I really can't type these days.
So we need to probably start to transition into looking at just checking in on decision making, of which this was sort of our site to think through our decision making process. And I was just is it okay if we sort of frame it that way? I mean, I think we've already been talking about process for next steps, so we can move there, and then we'll talk about the in-person meeting we have coming up. And Matt, Zed, maybe how are you for time? Because I think maybe we could actually have a conversation about setting the date for our meeting now, if you feel like you have to leave imminently.
Yeah, I have to leave in the next like 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's just do a slight rejig and put the partners meeting, pick a time now. And I wanted to just draw our attention to the place that we were sharing our availability and talk about potential locations. And then also indicate, and Kevin, I'm so glad you're on this call, that we had declared an original intention to possibly co-locate with the EDGI in-person meeting. So it seems like there are 2 potential days that are, Kevin, and it seems like there's some more timelines that have come up on partner schedules. So Kevin, can you say those dates, and then can we just quickly, then can we pick a date together?
Let me look for it.
They're basically end of July and end of August, right? So it looked like June was a little too early for us, and then starting in first week of September, people also get occupied.
Yeah. Do you have it in front of me? In you can just read out the dates that you have right in front of you.
I think it was the July 24th to 27th, and then August 27th to the 30th. That one I don't have in front of me.
It was Wednesday, July 25th to Friday, July 27th. That was the first option. And the second option would be Monday, August 27th to Thursday, August 30th. So not the whole time, obviously, but that somewhere within that time frame. So yeah, the end of July or the end of August.
And if we decide to co-locate with EDGI meeting in those date ranges, that would commit us to being in either Toronto or New York, with Toronto as the first choice.
Yeah.
Depending on, I guess, TRU availability.
Yeah, to Matt Price's question. So during the last all EDGI meeting, everybody was just kind of like, we could go to either place. So it made sense that we pick a date first, and then if that date true was available, then we'd have it in Toronto, and then if not, then we had to figure out how to have it in New York. But so Matt, do you know? I know you have like a shared schedule with Michelle like around that time, so maybe you have a sense of like, do those dates work in Toronto? You're muted.
You're muted, Matt P.
I think they would. I have to call up her calendar, and I'm not sure I see all the TRU stuff in her calendar, so I don't know. But I would think so.
Can we do a quick temperature check and/or hearing of counter proposals? Like, is there an immediate block from anyone on either of those windows, and/or the like default to Toronto with backup as New York in those windows?
The end of July would be really hard for me. I think I blocked it out on my calendar. Maybe I filled out the calendar wrong. But it's right before the DWeb Summit, so I'll be busy prepping for that. So it would be difficult.
Okay, so and then go Matt P.
So something proposal might be, if it's late, if EDGI's in late August, then could we then try to co-locate, do you think, Matt, Zed? And if EDGI's in July, then let's not try to co-locate, and we could just schedule it. We could try to schedule it. We could just pick that time as the data together thing, and if it's possible to co-locate, we will, and otherwise not.
Can I just say it back to make sure I understand, Matt P? So what you're saying is that we're deciding it's between August 27th and 30th, regardless. We're going to co-locate with EDGI if it also winds up at that time, and if not, then we will still hold at that time, but we can choose a different location.
Like Tahiti.
Maybe we'll go back to our list of locations, which included Toronto, New York, Philly.
Oh, let's go to Philly. I've never really been. That would be totally exciting for me.
I would love to have you guys in Philly. I'm not going to push for it. I also like Toronto.
Me too.
Me too. Okay, so Brendan, I see your hand, and then can we just do a quick vote on that? Because it sounds like we have our plan and we can aim to finalize it in the next week-ish. So Brendan.
Yeah, I did just want to say we might be able to help with space in both Toronto and New York on either date.
Oh, yeah.
That's exciting. Okay, so what we're gonna just do let's do a vote, because why not? That we're voting to host our partner meeting, potentially co-located, but regardless, August 27th to 30th. Okay. Wonderful. This is great. We picked a date. And the one thing I wanted to also flag is that I think we want to do some like considered prep work for it. And I don't know, but perhaps the right structure is similar to the mission, vision, value people having a working group, because that'll be our next longer call. And we imagined over the summer we might take some breaks on things, like not have as many weekly roundtables. So are there people who are interested in being a part of that? And the one piece I wanted to put forward as a potential is we met for one day last year, and part of me is thinking that we might want to try and think about a day and a half. So are there people who are really good at thinking about facilitating productive multi-day meetings and thinking about kind of pulling together some of the goals that we have already declared we want to do, and then work at them and then set a roadmap for the year ahead? That's the pitch.
You're asking who's gonna take responsibility for this? Is that what you're asking?
I may be.
You know, if Edgy just got a bunch of money, or if there is money around, like we could spend like $1,000 and have a world-class facilitator get us through this.
Are you telling me we get to spend money instead of just like labor and time? What? What is this notion?
What if we, I'm just wondering, when you said day and a half, I wondered, what if we take the morning off on the second day so that we have a day and a little break, and then a half day or something like that, like where we go sightseeing or kayaking or something in the morning. And I just wonder if that might be fantastic to do it that way. Anyway.
Hey, these are great thoughts, Matt. I feel like you could help on a committee.
I will help. I will help. This will be so. Sure, I will. In fact, take lead on that. I'll take point on that. Except Dawn knows. I mean, she should know. She doesn't really know that when I commit to something, what I'm really doing is committing Dawn to it. Because that's what always happens, is that Dawn does the work. So
Dawn doesn't know how to ice rock climb. so let's do it.
Ice surf.
I was gonna say I'm actually was thinking that it would probably be helpful if I was on it, just because I feel like I've done so much like trying to pulling threads through that I would hope that I could also offer something to the coordinating of that meeting, and my schedule will be better then. But I would not kind of be ready to start thinking about it till July.
And my inclination would be to want to contribute, but all my energy is going to go into this summit. Yeah. So I actually won't have headspace for exactly that kind of thinking until sometime in August.
I think we should tentatively, I put forth a motion that Matt and Dawn sort of maybe are the leading edge, but we're investigating spending some money on a world-class facilitator. I love that notion. But we want to get an answer back on that.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that we're saying we'll facilitate. That's a really great point, Liz and Brendan. I am absolutely committed to thinking about bringing in an outside facilitator. I think that is often really powerful. And I cut you off, Kevin.
I was just going to say, I want to change my vote to August now, so make sure we're co-located, and it would make sense. Then we can go to the steer committee and have like a facilitator for like both, because if they happen in the same place, same time, it'd make it a lot easier for everybody. So.
If we're in Toronto, you guys all want to go kayaking?
I
Let's
do.
go to the island. Let's kayak to the island in
let's
the
go.
morning.
That sounds great. Okay, so everyone, let's convince edgy people to change their dates to August, and then we'll do it on August. Okay, this is wonderful. Just in the interest of time. Oh, Matt's gone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Travels.
Take care.
Safe travels.
I'm at.
So does that mean decision making is decision? Are we gonna have a decision about decision making at that summit, or are we gonna try and do that in May and June?
We had said that we would imagine that coming out at that meeting. So kind of based on the process of going through the mission, vision, values process. But I think that's something that we should just think through and articulate some goals around for the like next 10 minutes of this call, or however long we want to talk about it within the time limits. Pakon, I saw your hand, and then Liz.
Yeah, no, it just, sorry, I got an urgent thing, so I kind of disappeared, but I was listening. I mean, not that this is not about a tool, but there's just lots of documentation around like how a tool can complement in-person meetings and kind of like allow them to kind of fray is not the word, but kind of diffuse on both sides. Particularly Lumio has a lot of how-to guides, and it's a little inspiring to hear. It would be great to arrive with data and solid things and not be sussing them out in person and reading through the kind of case studies of like how that tool is used, not that it's about the tool, but how it kind of coaxes that behavior of arriving with like lots of information that everyone already has like voted and temperature checked on and all these things. Feels like it would lead to I'm really excited in like some group I'm part of to get to the point where we arrive at the meeting with data and we're not like trying to suss out all this like volatile emotional things that aren't always communicated that well. So yeah, I don't know. It would be great as a goal, but
what do you think the process is then? I actually haven't really used Lumio, so I kind of don't really know, but would it be like to like check out the awesome list of decision making or something like that and see what the resources are that have been developed, and then have a document with 3 or 4 types of decision making process flows or something like that?
I think it could be as easy as often they encourage wherever the conversations are, essentially everyone kind of having buy-in to whatever the process is, even if it's not that they're doing it all themselves, but that they're okay with like one person who's facilitator kind of like pulling everything into this like process. And so it's a lot of perhaps like them, if it's in emails, it's like pulling the sentiments out of emails and the thoughts and things and dragging them into the thing. And the idea is hopefully people kind of follow that, see that lead and slowly follow it, and it becomes a little more natural. And that's how I've seen it pushed for Lumio to be like used. So it's always just this little nudge towards the thing. And so it's important that everyone's on board with like, I'm consenting to this constant nudge. And it doesn't all have to happen at once. Not everyone all gets it at once. But yeah, the openness to trying it, and then someone to own the kind of like to be the gravity for it. And then probably like small decisions would be, maybe a couple agenda items get like pre-discussed or like pre-rallied into this format before meetings.
I think Liz, you had your hand up as well.
It's unrelated though, so let me wait.
I'm sorry, I might have missed a hand. Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess I've been like, for what it's worth, it might not be data together if we're not having the sort of decisions that we feel we'd figure out this process before. Like it might be that if web monitoring is like having a lot of certain sorts of decisions that feel like they'd fit with like learning this really quick, it could be like with another group within Edgy that the decision-making process is really like fleshed out and figured out. And then it's essentially, I don't know, by the time we get to the meeting for us in the summer, we're able to like kind of go in with some people having some intuitions and some things that we've understood. So just as a thought.
Go, Kevin.
Yeah, just kind of related to Pat. Like I kind of brought up the issue of decision making because it felt like to me in a lot of meetings that we would like postponing or stalling because we didn't have a decision making process in place. So I just wanted us not to be like stalled like that. So I mean, the question is, do we have like big decisions that we have to make in between that time? And so are we okay with waiting until end of August and not have any type of decision-making process? Or like, do we want, to try something like PetCon's saying so that we have, we can go into the meeting with like some experience and some intuition about what we want, and instead of just waiting until then.
I can give my sense based on what we've talked about across roundtables and stuff. Potentially there were things, including thinking about reaching out to partners and hosting some sort of webinar. And one more that is escaping me, which is probably in the recap, where we would want a decision-making process. And so we had addressed the like intent to want to have one before end of summer. However, I think we always, I shouldn't say always, I think I just want to recognize that, things got really quiet last summer. I would anticipate them being similarly quiet this summer. Sounds like there's a lot of interleaving other events and stuff. In thinking about availability of partners, it might be like that some of us have availability at certain times when others don't. So I'm not sure if it'll be so critical that we don't move on that stuff until August. But that's just my sense. I saw PatCon and then Brendan.
Yeah, just to, in some ways, like through reading some of the documents and guides on, just because there's a focus around, there's lots of guides written for the process that is Lumio, but I'm not committed to it. But just it is sometimes, it seems like it fares well with slow decisions that like kind of don't, gives people lots of time because their attention isn't there, but it's kind of like slowly trudges forward. It doesn't just keep getting lost in back scroll and forgotten. So the slowness over the summer might actually not be a bad thing, although it's not gonna like no quick iteration, but it might still work in its own way positively.
Yeah, I just want to second PatCon's notion. I'd like to explore Lumio as a decision-making process because I think it would be we should be bold in our decision-making techniques. And right now, I'm kind of struggling for alternatives for decision-making frameworks. So I think using this interceding time as a chance to explore a different option like Lumio would be really nice. So PatCon, I'd be full behind you, particularly if you can help spearhead some of that. I'd be super pumped to frame some of those choices.
Yeah, go PatCon, but just before that, I want to surface what Jess said about a devil advocate point, which is we have discussed having a decision-making process for many months. I would say probably since October. So it might be something where we want to push forward and think through some of the mechanisms and quorum.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've given a few demos for other groups in the last while and prepared a few. So I'd be even ready like now to do a quick demo just to like remove some of the voodoo up from it, but it would not necessarily be anything official. It's not implying there's any decision now, but just to like remove the aura. But happy to do that or wait.
Just maybe to say, I think the issue is I think we've missed the window of all people being in the room. So I don't know if we might want to instead. Oh no!
My computer, sorry.
I'm just going to finish my thought because only us are in the same room. We might want to think about confirming a roundtable where that conversation would happen, and that is one that all people from across every organization, like all 4 organizations, can be at. Liz.
I don't know what's happening with PatCon's video, but
He spilled coffee on his computer.
oh god.
PatCon.
I feel like Lumio is not a decision-making like method so much that it's like it's changing the channel to a platform that is built around making decisions in multiple ways, so that it's a not Slack, it is a not email threads, it is a not collaborative Google Docking, or it's in addition to all those things. And it is like decision focused, but like a number of things can happen. Like there's polls and temperature checks, or like PatCon's example showed how to use sort of like a structured conversation moment of like sequencing through facts, feelings, ideas, and decision points. So I guess I just wanted to add that. I feel like I'm adding that as a clarifying point. And then I would also like to say, I would be willing, like I really don't know another kind of inclusive platform that is built around groups making decisions of whatever nature they decide to make more than Lumio. So I feel like totally fair about trying it as adding a channel versus like, I don't think it actually solves like, are we 100% consensus? Will we accept a quorum during the slow months of summer when half of us are surfing or whatever we're doing, or anything, or versus like the request for comments, per se. I don't know, does that make sense?
I think
Maybe Matt P, and then just in the interest of time, we maybe have to wrap this up in some way. Sorry, this is like the classic decision-making conversation.
I think what we need is to task someone with, giving a like a 5-minute presentation a month from now with 2 or 3 options and pros and cons or something. I feel my concern about this decision making thing is that it's just so hard to move forward on it because of the chicken and egg stuff. I don't know. So somebody needs to kind of take a lead somehow. That's what I think. It's not me.
So just as to sort of look back to what we've done, we demoed 2 previous other forms of decision-making scaffolds. So we looked at EDGI's protocol and collective writing, and then also, and this happened at the March meeting, and then we also looked at the RFC process, or like thinking about how that could be adapted from the one that Protocol Labs recently adopted. And so I wonder if maybe the next step, to build on Matt's point and also PatCon's, is that we have a roundtable where we demo the way that you're thinking about it, PatCon, and sort of Lumio as the site for that. But maybe whoever is it willing to do that, and I feel like this is maybe unfair because it doesn't necessarily have to be PatCon, but we maybe think from that and pull back the notes that came out of the previous round demos, and then that gives us the like what we need a decision-making structure to have, and that could be a thing that gets developed in advance of the meeting. And if it's coming together really cleanly, maybe we can work on it in a shared doc, similar to how the mission, vision, values work happened. So a working group is struck. And And then Pekon, you had a thought. And just to say, in the interest of time, I'm hoping maybe this could be the last conversation about decision-making stuff, if possible. Not last conversation, sorry, last comment, just to think of, like, we need to just like pull things together and look at what we need to think through for the next couple months.
Yeah, I'm happy to be a demo person. Also, I just wanted to put forward, I haven't been in as many meetings as some others have, but one tactic for this might be to actually literally, like, a thing that we closed, but that was very difficult. We remember it being very difficult, especially if there's recordings of the meeting. Like, it can be like a way, like, I could go back and essentially find the key points. We could essentially, like, much in the same way that it would happen like on the fly with an email, we could go back to an old difficult conversation or one that seemed to drag on forever, an old decision, and pull it into that format, and then maybe even like engage with it and like see if there's anything else that's still like sticking in our heads now. That's not for the point of opening it up again, but just to see, like, is this clear? Does it feel like, could we have stepped forward and closed it a little bit more cleanly? Anyway, just a way to kind of not have to do more work, and even like be able to look at the wealth of all the past recordings and past notes that we've had, and just like have it be an exercise for one person to like convert that into how it would be in Lumia world. If people know difficult decisions or ones that dragged on for a while or whatever, that would, like, there's a couple things to go through, and they would like me to check on that, I could do that. Could watch things on double speed and take some notes.
Awesome. Maybe Pekon, I can follow up with you off conversation about the sites of where that is, but I think the big one is mission, vision, decision making, as was dropped in the chat. Cool, wonderful. So it sounds like we're going to have a roundtable as the next step, and like review and produce some sort of identification of pain points, needs from previous decisions as well. So looking at what we had put on as the rest of things that were on our plate, there was a couple that it looks like we don't necessarily have time for now. I'm wondering if people are okay if we stay an extra 10 minutes just to kind of like pull things together. So that'll take us to 6:40. Okay. I think it's more just syncing up over the discussion topics, and that's it. So the first one is the Decentralized Web Summit, but Matt Zed is gone. It sounds like he's going to have sort of maybe a fuller role as part of that. I think maybe we should have a conversation and think about what Data Together's, what Data Together's role needs to be. Or not needs to be, like, what kind of do we want it to be? Do we want to have a conversation about that? And I'm wondering if anyone on the call feels able, like, is a little more in the loop, has a sense on that, and wants to add something now, or if that's something we want to mark as a reach out to Matt Zed to clarify in a public place. Oh wait, Matt Price is going, and Matt Price is going away for a while.
Have such a good time.
Bye, Matt.
Yeah.
Safe travels.
See you guys.
Yeah, my notes are pretty sparse. I tend to do these kind of. I mean, not
Okay,
not
so
I could probably run to the other room.
Yeah, does anyone have a sense of that? Or is that just a follow up with Matt Zed? Because it sounds like he's taking like a larger role in planning of that. Okay, so let's mark that as a to-do. Is someone able to take over with notes?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, sorry, I am. Okay, sorry. There's a separate meeting going on right beside me. Then the next thing was partners meeting. It sounds like we have struck a working group. We have a date window, and ideally it'll align with Edgy, so that's wonderful. And then the next thing below is reading course. And so Matt Price was the lead on that, and I was also helping. And we actually have pulled together a reading schedule for that. And we were kind of just at the point of thinking about how we wanted to imagine that running over the summer. And so the way we had talked about it, and I don't know if we need to spend too much time on it now, is that we would meet monthly at a round table time. So we'll swap out a round table once a month into a discussion of a reading group and ask people to pick one reading that they would read and then have sort of a share around of all of the people who joined. And I'm sorry, poorly looking for where this is. Is there any points or feedback or something on that? So we're kind of targeting mid-May once Matt is back as to start thinking about a start. And so this, again, would just sort of like re-sequence what our roundtables are for over the summer into September.
All
Awesome.
for it. So good. Want to merge.
Okay, so then that is, I guess, just there's a scheduling to do around that once Matt is back. Then website and outreach. I know Kevin, well, Liz led that conversation. I'm so sorry I missed it. And Kevin had those great follow-up notes. And then we also were thinking about our capacity for website stuff between now and the in-person meeting. So I'm wondering if maybe Liz and Kevin, if you want to speak to like sort of coming out of that doc, next steps and thinking between now and I guess now that we know that the meeting is end of August, and then we'll link in the website conversation.
Liz, you want to go first? Or? For my role is just we talked about a lot of different institutions or partners that we could approach, and so I just kind of categorized them. Generally, there was like these community organizers, kind of governance areas. There were people that were actually like data platforms, so they were provided software. There were people that were data portals, so you go there and you had access to all sorts of different information from many different places, and they usually offered like data visualizations of that information as well. And then there was just straight like data providers, which were like things like all those open data government sites that we have. So the idea was like the question was like, who should we reach out to like next immediately? And and the question I had was like, well, do we need this decision-making process to make that decision, like who to reach out to, or if we should or not, and stuff like that, or when should we begin doing that? I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. Any thoughts?
Go Brendan, and then I'll jump on stack after.
Yeah, I think in lieu of a decision-making process, one thing that seems to be working quite effectively is that the individual partners are reaching out to some of these categories of people. And so if we don't make any momentum on the actual decision-making, like I know Edgy's doing some like Climate Alliance stuff, and we're doing some work, Query's building some partnerships in some other necks of the woods. And so like one of the other aspects of this might be to sort of like collect some of the partnerships that are already kind of accumulating. But I just think that might be a way to unblock some of the decision-making fatigue or the lack of a system, is just to sort of, okay, well, cool, route it through any of the individual partners, whether it be Public Lab, whether it be P-Lab, whether it be any of the four of us. And we can sort of bring that to the fold once we know how to do it, just as a suggestion to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like to one piece of your question, which is not the decision-making part, is like the process kind of connects to the website question. And this is going to maybe feel a little blunt. I just don't really know if we have the capacity to do it before August, because I have there was a lot of great work and stuff has been done on the website stuff, but we had sort of solicited or asked if there was more feedback and a few other steps, but it doesn't seem like people have been able to contribute, and that's totally fine. But I'm wondering if we need to be mindful of that when we think about a timeline. And so I would be nervous of us setting an immediate goal if we know it might just be one that we miss. So, sorry, that's like maybe not a great answer. Yeah, go Kevin.
No, I was just gonna say like that totally makes sense. Like the EDJ group was talking about like slowing down, and like I feel like we all kind of need that, and that's okay. So the question, my question was like, do we need to do this immediately? And then if the answer is no, like that's fine with me. I think if we can wait a couple months and make sure we got like our website up clearly and everything like together. That it makes sense to like slow down and wait. But it's nice to know like who's out there, who we could think to approach.
Do other people have thoughts around that? It seems like, I mean, if there are people who have a strong sense of being able to lead on thinking about an outreach strategy and or decision-making strategy, I think that would be really wonderful. So Jess's comment about us still being in the research stage, for sure. I mean, maybe that feels like where we are. Okay, so then the last two items, the first one was the requirements work plan that was discussed above. We have a great, we have the feedback and a sense of a timeline from @Z, which is really great. And it sounds like there'll be a version that gets brought back to EDGI in May, June. And then the last piece, I guess, is code of conduct. And that was coming out of a really awesome roundtable where Liz and @Z imparted all of their wisdom. And Eben and I looked back at that, and we started a draft doc, but I think we haven't returned to it. And the goal was not to move super fast on that, but thinking about that, in the lead up to our partner meeting. So I think we're still on track to have a version that's maybe marked up and bringing some of the examples that were pointed out both by Liz and @Z of thinking about how we need our code of conduct to be more fulsome. And then there was 2 priorities identified about like the next step that would improve it. And so I wonder to just say, I think we're maybe at the meeting timeline, but I'm wondering if people have feedback or thoughts that they wanted to add now, and then also maybe about other to-dos that we need to keep in our mind. Okay, seeing none, and maybe it being the sudden increase in temperature that all of us are not used to because I'm feeling wilted. If there's any final wrap-up to-dos, I would just say it sounds like we have 2 large working group areas that are going to be tackling stuff to take us through to August, one being the mission, vision, values, and that's on a much shorter timeline, and the slight longer one is the planning the meeting working group. More hands always welcome. And then we have the sort of to-dos that came out of these smaller areas, and sort of the question remains around decision making, but I think our next step on that is the demo that'll happen at an upcoming roundtable. And so I'll make sure that that's one that everyone can attend when we choose that, because I think that's really critical for the next piece of that. So it probably won't be until Matt P is back from India, which is like a month. Are there any other things that we want to surface? I can pull together all the to-dos coming out of this and drop a recap probably tomorrow morning. Go Pekka.
Yeah, I guess the demo relate. I just would like to suggest that maybe we could record it, and if quorum doesn't necessarily have to include every single last person, including Matt, maybe we could move before then. But it's up to, just wanted to suggest that.
Great. Yeah. Well, let's confirm because it's a good thing to flag. Okay. Well, then, how about we call this a meeting?
Bye,
Yay,
everyone.
thanks everybody.
Y'all are great.
Nice seeing
Yeah.
you guys.
They're all
Y'all amazing.
Y'all amazing.